The Mediterranean sun spilled gold over the cliffs, setting the sea ablaze in sapphire and silver. Luca Bellanti leaned against the weathered railing of the Piazza del Duomo, his camera slung around his neck, pretending to frame the cathedral. In truth, his lens was fixed on the woman below. She stood near a cluster of market stalls, sunlight caught in the folds of her white linen dress. Her wide-brimmed hat shadowed her face, but even from here, Luca could see the curve of her lips, the way she tilted her head as if listening to music only she could hear. She bought a single sprig of rosemary from an old vendor, pressed a coin into his palm, and smiled a smile so quiet and fleeting it felt like a secret. Something about her made the world tilt. Luca had photographed models, politicians, even royalty. But this woman, this stranger, was the first person in years who made him lower his camera and simply look. Then she turned. Their eyes met. A spark flared in the air between them, sharp and dangerous as lightning over a summer sea. She didn't look away. Instead, she walked toward him. "Why are you watching me?" she asked, her voice soft but steady, like waves against rock. Luca's lips curved into the smallest of smiles. "Because you look like a story I don't know yet." For the first time, her mouth quirked into something that might have been a smile, if not for the sadness that shadowed it. "You don't want this story," she said, brushing past him. But Luca had already decided, whatever she was hiding, whatever darkness swam beneath those calm Amalfi skies, he was going to find out. The night fell over Amalfi like velvet, draping the coastline in shadows and silver moonlight. Down by the water, the sea lapped lazily against the rocks, the air thick with the scent of jasmine and salt. Luca found her again. She was sitting alone at a seaside cafe, a glass of limoncello blowing gold between her fingers. The lights from the harbor caught in her eyes, turning them into twin reflections of the sea. He approached quietly, his heart an unsteady drum. "Do you always disappear after stealing a man's attention?" he asked. She looked up, her lips curling just enough to betray amusement. "Do you always follow strangers?" "Only the ones who make the rest of the world feel muted." Her gaze lingered on him for a beat too long, as if weighing something. "Sit," she said. They spoke in low tones, words weaving between them like silk threads, about photography, about the sea, about how Amalfi smelled different at night than in the morning. Then, as though it cost her something, she said, "Isla." Her name. It rolled through his mind like a slow tide, warm and dangerous. "Isla," he repeated, tasting it, committing it to memory. He didn't reach for her hand, but his gaze did not leave hers. And in that heavy, unspoken pause, the air between them seemed to hum. An almost electric promise that this was not the last night they would spend under the Amalfi skies. The morning sun spilled over Amalfi in liquid gold, painting the sea in colors that could make even the most jaded heart believe in miracles. Isla was there before him, perched on the edge of the pier, sketchbook balanced on her knees. The breeze teased a strand of hair into her face, and she tucked it behind her ear with a gesture so soft it felt rehearsed by the gods. Luca approached quietly, his shadow stretching toward her. "Do you always draw the sea?" She didn't look up. "The sea changes every hour. I like things that can't be owned." "Maybe they can't be owned," he said, stepping closer, "but they can be kept. In memory." She glanced at him, then really looked at him, and for the briefest second, the morning stilled. The waves slowed, the gulls fell silent, and he could swear the air warmed. He sat beside her, close enough for their knees to almost touch. She handed him the sketchbook without a word. He flipped through pages filled with ink and watercolors, storms, sunsets, harbors, but on the last page, a face. His face. Luca's breath caught. "You drew me?" "I don't draw people," she said, voice low. "Only things I can't forget." The pier swayed gently beneath them. Without thinking, his fingers brushed hers as he passed the book back. A whisper of skin on skin, barely a touch, but enough to set something smoldering in the space between them. Her eyes flicked to his, and for the first time, she didn't look away. That evening, Amalfi was a cascade of lanterns and low laughter, the scent of lemon and salt air curling through the narrow streets. Luca had invited her, not to dinner, not to a cafe, but to see the city breathe at night. They walked side by side, shoulders brushing now and then, the cobblestones glowing faintly under the light of hanging lamps. She was aware of every sound, the tap of his shoes, the soft timbre of his voice, the quiet pauses he let fall between words as if each one was chosen with care. When they reached a small balcony carved into the cliffside, the entire coastline opened before them, dark sea, jeweled lights, and the distant hum of waves against rock. "You were right," Isla whispered. "It does breathe." He turned to her then, leaning on the iron railing. "And you, are you still hard to keep?" She smiled faintly, eyes fixed on the horizon. "I'm not something that should be kept." He stepped closer, too close for her pulse to remain steady. "Maybe not. But maybe. I can be the place you return to." The words hung between them like a dare. She looked up, meeting his gaze in the soft golden spill of the street lamp behind them. And then the world narrowed to a single moment, his hand cupping her jaw, thumb brushing the faintest line along her cheek. She didn't move away. Didn't speak. The night around them was warm, but when he bent his head slightly, every inch between them felt electric, like the air before a summer storm. She stepped back first, just enough to keep the moment from breaking completely. "Careful, Luca," she murmured, voice softer than the sea below. He smiled, slow, knowing. "I'm not afraid of deep water." The next morning, the sky was brushed in the pale pink of dawn when Isla found herself wandering toward the harbor. She told herself she was there for the quiet, for the smell of brine and wood and freshly baked bread from the nearby bakery. But when she saw Luca leaning against his small fishing boat, sleeves rolled up, hair damp from the sea, she knew the truth. She'd been looking for him. "You're up early," he said, smiling that slow, unhurried smile. "I could say the same," she replied, though the corner of her lips betrayed her. He handed her a cup of espresso from a thermos, and they sat on the worn wooden bench overlooking the water. For a long moment, they simply watched the gulls wheel above the tide. "Tell me something you haven't told anyone here," he said suddenly, his voice low. She hesitated. Secrets were dangerous currency. "I came to Amalfi to forget someone. I thought distance would drown the ghost." His eyes softened, though there was something in them, something that wanted to be let in. "And has it?" "Not yet." She glanced at him. "But lately, I've been thinking about someone else." He didn't move for a beat, as if testing the weight of her words. Then, without a single warning, his hand found hers warm, steady, almost possessive. Her breath caught. She should have pulled away, but instead, she leaned into him. His scent was sun-warmed skin and salt water, and when his lips touched hers, it wasn't tentative. It was slow, deliberate, a kiss that asked questions and left no space for lies. Her hand slid up his chest, feeling the slow thud of his heartbeat, and the world, the sea, the gulls, the whole sunlit coast, fell away. When they finally broke apart, their foreheads rested together. "You shouldn't have done that," she whispered, though her voice lacked conviction. "I know," he murmured, "but I'd do it again." By midday, the sun blazed against the whitewashed walls of the village, and the sea glittered like a million shards of sapphire. Isla hadn't planned to see Luca again so soon, but fate, or perhaps temptation, was working overtime. She found him at his workshop by the shore, repairing fishing nets. The smell of tarred rope and salt filled the air. He looked up, his hands pausing mid-motion, and the moment their eyes met, the rest of the world blurred. "You're avoiding me," he said without accusation, though his tone carried a faint challenge. "I'm thinking," she replied, stepping inside. "About what?" She swallowed. "About that kiss." He stood, closing the space between them slowly, like a tide creeping up the shore. "And what did you decide?" "That I should stay away," she breathed. His smile was a dangerous one. "Then why are you here, Isla Mia?" Before she could answer, his hands were on her waist, pulling her to him. Her fingers tangled in his hair, the heat of his body pressing into hers. The kiss this time was fiercer, an unspoken admission that whatever this was, it wasn't casual anymore. Her back brushed against the rough wooden wall, the grain biting gently into her skin through the thin fabric of her dress. His lips trailed down her jaw, to the hollow of her neck, where her pulse thudded like a drumbeat. She exhaled a shaky laugh. "This is reckless." "Then let's be reckless," he murmured, his breath warm against her skin. The sound of the waves outside seemed to echo the rush in her veins. She could taste salt on his lips, feel the calluses of his hands against her, and in that stolen afternoon, there was no past, no future, only the storm they were making between them. When they finally parted, breathless and flushed, she knew two things: this was far too deep to walk away from now, and it was only a matter of time before the world caught up to them. The night was warm, the kind where the sea breeze carried the scent of lemons and the air seemed to hum with possibility. Luca had insisted Isla join him for a late sail, despite her protests about the hour. The boat rocked gently under the weight of the waves, lantern light flickering across his face. She sat opposite him, her knees tucked beneath her, watching the way his hands worked the ropes, strong, sure, and unhurried, as though he had all the time in the world. "Tell me something true," he said suddenly, his voice low over the splash of water against the hull. She hesitated. "Something true?" "Yes. Something you've never told anyone." Her eyes dropped to the water, its dark surface broken only by glints of silver moonlight. "I've been running my whole life," she admitted softly. "From places, from people, from myself." Luca's gaze didn't waver. "Then stop running. Stay." The words hit her like a wave, warm, crushing, impossible to resist. "I can't." He moved across the boat in 2 strides, crouching in front of her. His fingers traced her cheek, slow enough that she felt each breath between them. "You can," he whispered, and then he kissed her, the kind of kiss that felt like it could anchor her in this place forever. Her hands gripped his shirt, pulling him closer until his chest pressed against hers, until the world shrank to the salt on his lips and the warmth of his breath. The sea swayed beneath them, but she felt steady in his arms. When they finally broke apart, her forehead rested against his. "You're dangerous," she murmured. "Only if you plan on leaving," he said with a faint smile. But in the silence that followed, the creak of the boat seemed to carry another truth. Somewhere out there, a storm was building, and neither of them knew if it would tear them apart or bind them even closer. Rain came early that night, sweeping in from the sea like a dark-winged bird. Amalfi's streets, usually alive with music and chatter, were hushed under the heavy patter of water. Isla stood at the balcony of her small apartment, watching the harbor lights shimmer through the mist. A knock came, sharp, urgent. She opened the door to find Luca, drenched from head to toe, his hair plastered to his forehead, his shirt clinging to every sculpted line of him. "You could have called," she said, but her voice trembled. "I didn't want to give you the chance to say no." He stepped inside without waiting for permission, water pooling at his feet. "We need to talk, Isla. Now." Before she could reply, his hands were on her face, his mouth crashing against hers with a hunger she'd never felt before. The rain still clung to his skin, cool against the heat of her own. She melted into him, her fingers sliding into his wet hair, pulling him closer until there was no space left between them. When they broke apart, breathless, he whispered, "I don't care about the past you're running from. I care about now. About us." Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "And if my past destroys you? Then I'll go down with you," he said without hesitation, his thumb brushing the corner of her lips. "But I'm not letting you go." Lightning lit the room for a split second, casting his face in stark relief, the stubborn jaw, the fierce devotion in his eyes. It struck her then that this man was more than just a summer escape. He was the one thing she'd always been too afraid to want. They sank to the floor, tangled together, the storm raging outside while something wilder burned between them. And for the first time in years, Isla stopped running, not because she felt safe, but because she didn't care if she was in danger, as long as Luca was there. The storm had passed, but the air the next morning was heavy, thick with the scent of wet stone and salt. Isla woke to the sound of church bells, sunlight spilling across Luca's bare chest where he lay beside her. She traced a finger over his heartbeat, wondering how something so steady could make her feel so undone. "Stay in bed," he murmured without opening his eyes, pulling her closer. "I can't," she whispered, though every cell in her body wanted to. "It's not safe anymore." She slipped from the sheets, but when she opened the balcony shutters, her breath caught. Across the piazza, leaning casually against a cafe wall, was a man she knew too well, sharp suit, cruel smile. The one who had chased her across continents. Her stomach dropped. "He's here." Luca was up in an instant, standing beside her. "Who?" "My past," she said, her voice barely audible. The man raised his coffee cup and a mock toast, eyes locked on hers. Luca's arm came around her waist protectively. "Then he'll have to go through me." Hours later, as dusk painted Amalfi in shades of rose and gold, Luca led her through the narrow streets to the cliffs above the town. The sea was a black mirror, reflecting the first stars of night. "You don't have to fight for me," she said, her hands pressed against his chest. "I don't fight because I have to, Isla," he said, voice low. "I fight because I'd rather die than watch you disappear again." She kissed him then, fierce, desperate, every touch threaded with the fear that it might be their last. His hands roamed her back, her neck, her hair, memorizing every inch of her as though he could keep her by sheer force of will. Below them, the waves crashed against the rocks. Above them, the stars burned. Between them, there was no space for anything but the kind of love that made running impossible. But in the shadows of the path they'd taken, someone was watching. The bells of Sant Andrea tolled just before dawn, their solemn sound rolling over the sleepy town. Isla stood at the cliff's edge, her heart a storm in her chest. The man from her past was here, and Luca had gone to face him alone. She had told him not to. He hadn't listened. Through the mist rising from the sea, two figures emerged in the piazza below Luca, his stance protective, and the man, smiling like a predator. Isla could only make out fragments of their voices carried on the wind. "You think you can keep her," the man sneered. "She's mine." "She was never yours," Luca growled. The sound of a struggle reached her, and something in Isla broke. She ran barefoot, hair streaming, heart pounding, down the winding stone steps until she reached the square. The man turned, surprise flashing across his face, but she didn't stop. "Stay away from him," she said, stepping between them. He laughed. "Or what?" Her hand shook, but her voice didn't. "Or you'll find out exactly what I'm capable of." Luca's hand slid into hers, and she felt his pulse racing to match her own. In that moment, the man realized whatever power he once had was gone. Together, they were unbreakable. By the time the first rays of sun spilled over Amalfi, the danger had passed. The man was gone, swallowed by the labyrinth of streets and the waking day. Luca turned to her, cupping her face. "You could have been hurt." "So could you," she whispered. His mouth crashed against hers then, hot and unyielding, every ounce of fear and relief spilling into the kiss. It wasn't gentle, it was survival, passion, promise. The kind that leaves you trembling even when it ends. When they finally pulled apart, breathless, Luca pressed his forehead to hers. "From the first moment I saw you, I knew you'd ruin me. And you," she said, smiling through tears, "saved me." The sea stretched endless and blue beneath the rising sun. Amalfi glimmered like a dream around them. And for the first time in years, Isla knew she wasn't running anymore. She was home.